Hello, everyone. Time is closing here for the month of April. If you would like to support this podcast and a local nonprofit by the name of Free Our Girls, head on over to our website. We will have their executive director on the podcast very soon, and we are currently gearing up for our next local nonprofit of the month for May. If you want to check it all out, that's www.themoreyouKnowco.com. Welcome to The More You NoCo. This is a podcast bringing you wonderful ideas and conversations from the people of Northern Colorado. I am your host, Ivan Wayne. What do we have this time? Let's see. We weren't sure what we would cover in our conversation before the mic turned on. Tornadoes were the spotlight of half our conversation, and why not? Valerie Mosley is a photojournalist in Northern Colorado who is, like myself, originally from Oklahoma, and she has covered tornado aftermaths in her career, but is now taking some time to figure out her role in between entrepreneurship and freelance photojournalism. Without further ado, here's our wonderful conversation. Okay, I sit here at a tiny children's table in the, what is this? The Council Tree Library in Fort Collins up here. Interesting space. I've not been out to this library in Fort Collins before.
Yeah.
But I sit here with Valerie, and we'll start off with, what part of my home state, Oklahoma, are you from?
I'm from Midwest City.
Okay.
Which is a suburb of Oklahoma City, close to Tinker Air Force Base. So
is that on the south side?
Kind of southeast, yeah.
So you're very familiar with tornadoes?
Yes.
And tornado warnings?
Yes, very familiar with tornado warnings. And I never really took them seriously growing up in Oklahoma. Probably same for you, right? Like, they happen all the time, and it's always, like, somewhere else, kind of. I don't know. That's how I always felt. It's like, all right, we'll go hide out in the bathroom for a while, but it's not really going to come this way, you know?
Yeah.
But then I covered the Joplin tornado when I was at the Springfield News Leader. It's about an hour away. And after covering that, I was pretty scared of tornado warnings because that town was devastated. It was like it wiped out about a third of that town.
Did you see the tornado?
I didn't. We had warnings in Springfield, but like I said, it was about an hour away. Mm-hmm. So I showed up the next morning at like 5 a.m. And so I didn't see a lot of the awfulness that people saw that were there right after it, but it was like still people like walking around in shock, and you know, the houses were completely leveled, like piles of sticks, you know, and I remember looking around, like, it was frustrating to photograph because I felt like I could never capture the totality of it, you know, just like how all-encompassing it was. It was crazy.
I'm often disappointed when I see things in person. I reach to pull out my camera or I want to record it on video, and I just halfway through even taking the picture, I haven't even looked at it, I just know that I'm going to delete it because it's not going to do anything justice to what I'm seeing with my own eyes.
Yeah, that was definitely the feeling. Like, there's no way to show how devastating this is, you know?
Yeah. And for most people who don't know, south side of Oklahoma City, maybe arguably in the world, it's the place that has been hit by the most tornadoes ever in history, at least from our recorded history here in the United States. And so that is a notorious place. I mean, I grew up on the north side of Tulsa, so for us, I mean, we're basically in serene, safe land compared to where you grew up.
Yeah, I heard something about how tornadoes, something about the geography, they kind of skip over the Tulsa area a lot more. But that, South Oklahoma City, like Moore, that's where my mother still lives to this day. And that's the second tornado I covered, was the Moore tornado. I forget what year, but must have been 2013, 2014. And that was like within a mile of my mom's house. It was crazy. Like, it destroyed the hospital where I watched my nephew's birth, you know? And so that was like even crazier because I had a more personal connection with that area.
So have you ever seen one in person?
I've seen them, in the distance, like not up close, but yeah. My mom is kind of like not notorious. She's kind of known for outrunning them, like in her car. Like she's like more than once. She's been like on her way home from work or whatever, and there's a tornado behind her, and she'll just keep driving.
Now's the appropriate time to disobey the speed limit.
Right, exactly. She left when I went to Oklahoma State, and I remember she visited there once, and when they were leaving, there was a, what do they call it when the tornado's over the water? It's like a
water spout?
Yeah, there was one of those, like, just right next to her as they're, like, driving along. But, like, I feel like, kind of like what I was saying before, when you live in Oklahoma and you're around them all the time, maybe you're not as scared of them as you should be.
Right, because they're more common.
Yeah.
Well, it's like people in California would be terrified, gasps, to hear a story about a tornado, but don't put me in an earthquake zone. That would freak me out, you know, as a person who grew up around tornadic activity. But I was always a person who, unlike yourself, I took every warning super seriously. I was always extremely nervous and anxious through spring and early summer because I was always terrified of experiencing a tornado. A lot of people are surprised to find out that I've only seen one in person, and it wasn't until about 2 years ago. I was home in north side of Tulsa in Owasso during spring break. Tornado warning. It was the traditional. The sky was very green. I just wanted to go out and see it. And I looked up, and the clouds were swirling up in the air, and I thought, wow, like we must be actually close to some sort of rotation or tornado. So the back wall of my mom's house is a brick wall. Can't see over it. It's like 7 or 8 feet tall. So I grabbed a flimsy lawn chair and I ran over to the wall because I just wanted to peek over and look to the west side. Plant this plastic chair, stand up in it, look over the wall, and I'm looking directly at a tornado that's heading for us.
That's scary.
That's crossing the town. And my mom is like, get inside. And I, of course, as a true Oklahoman, I pull my phone out to record this because this is awesome. And ended up missing it, going south of us by about a mile.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it like picked up and dropped back down later. And so we wouldn't have been hit, but definitely that was the only time I took shelter for real and thought like, this is going to be my first experience of hopefully living through a tornado, but it missed us still.
Well, I'm glad.
Yeah.
I remember always hearing that if it's coming towards you, it just like looks like it's getting bigger.
Oh, I didn't watch it that long.
Yeah.
I didn't get that close.
Probably a good thing.
I'd say it was probably 2 miles out when I stopped filming. But yeah, so
that's crazy.
And it was weird moving out here and hearing that occasionally, like up in Windsor back in 2012, 2013, they have tornadoes from time to time. In fact, one touched down just north of Greeley a couple weeks ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't hear about that one.
I don't think it damaged anything severely, but they will occur out here.
Yeah. Well, and Weld County has the most. I think I heard. Now, don't quote me on this. You can cut this out if it's totally wrong. But
I'm definitely going to leave it in now.
Great. Well, I heard that Weld County has more tornadoes than anywhere else in the United States, but it's because it's so big and so rural that you don't really hear about them because they don't really cause any damage. I think that was in the Colorado a few years ago.
Interesting. Yeah. I might put some stakes out and debate this with more Oklahoma because, my goodness, the south side of Oklahoma City just is it seems like every year.
Well, it's like it carved a path, too. You know, like that tornado I covered the aftermath of, it had basically ran the same course like 10 years prior or something, maybe more, because I was at OSU then. That was, I feel like I've always been like watching tornadoes on the news, like scared for my family and trying to get a hold of them, you know. But yeah, they've been safe so far.
Yeah, playing novice meteorologist.
Right.
Well, it's weird to think because tornadoes are a sky phenomenon, right? They drop out of the clouds and they connect with the ground. But I think it's also important to remember that the ground influences the way weather patterns act. I mean, west side of the Rockies versus the Front Range here in northern Colorado. And so it's easy to think that storms and tornadoes would develop in a similar pattern over time, and that if you get hit in one spot, you are likely to, experience more tornadoes in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what's happening. I never really thought much about the geography influencing the weather because, in Oklahoma, there's not much geography, at least in the middle part of the state, right?
Yeah.
It's just flat. And...
Well, I think something as small as a lake or a riverbed can influence tornadic activity, which I think really is what is occurring. You had mentioned before that there's some wives' tale about Tulsa. And some of the superstition is around native burial lands that are just to the west of Tulsa, but it happens to also coincide perfectly with a river that approaches Tulsa from the west and splits into the center of the city and goes south. And so a lot of the thought is that it disrupts that pattern right there as it's traveling, because storms out in Oklahoma travel from west to east, and so it'd be coming down that riverbed and it'd be hard for it to maintain its course into Tulsa.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that, but yeah, that kind of makes sense with my limited knowledge of meteorology.
I am coming at you with 0% meteorology experience. So.
Okay.
It's funny, we are 10 minutes into this podcast. We've discussed tornadoes.
In depth.
Which is not why we sat down here. But you've worked with tornadoes as a photojournalist, which brings you to us today.
Right.
So how were you involved in these tornado stories? Did you work for a paper or a news source and they asked you to cover it at the time?
Yeah, so the first one, and I've only covered those two that I mentioned, but so I went back to school to become a photojournalist. I went to the University of Missouri.
Mizzou, right?
Mizzou, yeah, the journalism school there, which is the oldest in the country.
Oh, woo woo.
The first.
So what did you go to school for the first time?
English. Okay. I got a bachelor's degree in English at Oklahoma State, and that was kind of like, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I really liked reading and talking about books. So I was like, I guess I'm an English major, Right. I think it's kind of crazy that we expect 19, 20-year-olds to figure out what they want to do with their lives, because who knows at that age,
You say that, and then at the same time, think about 100 years ago and before, by 1819, people had 5 kids, and they had been working in their quote-unquote career for 6 years already.
True.
So, yes.
Yeah, but these days there's so many more options. I think, there's too many directions you could go. So
yeah. In the 1800s, you were 5th generation of whatever it was your family's been up to.
Right.
Yeah.
Not much possibility outside of the life that you knew or was expected, right?
Yeah.
Maybe.
So you're in Missouri doing photojournalism?
So I went to Missouri, got a master's in journalism, emphasis photojournalism, and then I got hired at the Springfield News Leader, Springfield, Missouri, and I worked there for 5 years. So that's when I covered the Joplin tornado. I think it was within my first or second year. I should have looked up these dates, but I didn't know we'd be talking so much about tornadoes.
Yeah, I didn't either. That makes two of us.
But yeah, so it was just Joplin was an hour away. It was a huge story at the time because it was an EF5, I guess they say now. And like I said, it destroyed a third of the town. And so it was kind of like the biggest news event that I had ever covered at the time. And there were, camera crews from all over the U.S. there. And it was also just, I don't know, it was really hard,
Yeah.
all these people that had lost so much, and how do you cover that respectfully, and plus it's just hard, there's nowhere to go to the bathroom. That was kind of a thing. The first morning I actually used it. I don't know if I want to talk about this. That's kind of crazy. But there was a wall completely missing, and but the stall to the bathroom was still there. So I used a bathroom stall that was open to the sky.
When
Weird.
you gotta go, you gotta go.
Well, what else are you gonna do?
Right. So you get into photojournalism, and then you find yourself in these situations that can follow you home and take a huge emotional toll, and you're like, whoa, I don't know if I signed up for this.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like covering war. I don't know how those photographers do it, but, there's kind of a similar, responsibility and just wanting to do right by the people that you're covering. But it is, I felt like maybe I had a touch of PTSD after that for a little bit. Like I said, tornado warnings would happen after Joplin, and I would be running around the house gathering up all my stuff because suddenly it was real to me, I hadn't really been in the midst of that chaos before that. So
I think that's a common phenomenon for adults is we will talk things down until we see them for ourselves. And you know, whether that be weather phenomenon or something else, once we experience it and see its true face, then we may react appropriately or even more than what's appropriate next time.
Right. And I feel like that's kind of the power of photography that's always, you know, been what attracted me to photojournalism in the first place, is like being able to show people things that change how they think or feel about something, you know? I don't know if it really applies in tornadoes because, like I said, I didn't feel like I could cover it the way I saw it, but yeah.
Something brutal about tornadoes, in addition, for those who have never seen a video from the sky or seen the aftermath, is that your neighbor's house could be completely demolished, wrecked. They've lost literally everything that they own, and your house is just fine, or maybe it's missing some shingles. Whereas versus like an earthquake or a hurricane, everyone in that region is going to be similarly affected, right? Because the center and just the mass of the storm cell coming in is huge. But a tornado, if it's not an F5, if it's smaller, you know, it's going to cut a line through a community, and that has always been just one thing that sticks with me about tornadoes.
Yeah, I remember seeing, you know, half a house destroyed and like the clothes in the closet are still hanging neatly with like the rest of the house gone.
Whoa.
Isn't that weird?
Like that had to be strange, right? Because like they were probably like getting half pulled off the hanger, and then when the storm passed, they...
Well, and this was not actually Joplin, because that was, you know, everything was gone, at least in that path. But that was in Del City near my grandma's house. The first one when I was in school at Oklahoma State, I went down and saw some of the aftermath afterwards.
So you're a photojournalist, and you landed in northern Colorado.
Yeah, so I transferred to the paper here. My former paper was a Gannett paper, as was the Coloradoan, and so I worked there for about a year and a half and then left to start my own business.
And so now you are entrepreneur out there doing photojournalism, and what corner of said field industry are you in now?
Yeah, so...
Because you're not covering tornadoes anymore.
No, I'm not. Although I'm doing a little bit of freelance work for newspapers. I had an assignment from the Washington Post last fall, and just in the last month or so I did something for the Denver Post.
Very nice.
Which was cool. So yeah, I would love to do more freelance photojournalism, but I can't imagine making enough money for my, you know, to support myself on just that. So I'm very much trying to still do photojournalism, but for other types of clients, like businesses and nonprofits. And I also love doing documentary family photography, which is kind of a new concept to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But
in case they missed a previous episode, can you explain for our listeners what that is?
Documentary family photography?
Yes, because it is equally strange and fascinating to me.
Is it? Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird thing to like ask somebody to let you document them, you know, because people aren't used to it, and they are like, "What do you want me to do?" Like,
well, the interesting thing to me is that they approach you, they pay you, and then you like document them. It's this strange interaction.
Yeah,
it's fascinating.
Kind of. Yeah, I mean, I haven't really promoted that work much because I'm not sure like who are the people who want it. I don't really know how to find them. But I have one client that hires me like twice a year. And yeah, so I'd like to grow that. But basically, documentary family photography it's different from portrait photography because you're not posing. You know, most people think of family photos. You go out to a park and then, you know, kids cry and scream until you can wrangle them into like the right position for maybe one good photo.
I said smile.
And, yeah, exactly. So what I think is cool about documentary family is it's just like you're just documenting real life, right? You don't need the kids to do anything special. You just need them to do what they're doing. And I document it. And I think those photos can be a lot more meaningful and powerful when you look at them years later. Like it's your actual life, you know, not some contrived park session, or not to knock that, but it's, you know, a different thing.
Well, yeah. No, as strange as I think it is, I see the value immediately because look at some of the most powerful photos that, you know, if you were to if you were to ask different news syndicates or whatever to put together the 100 most powerful photos that they've ever seen or that we've ever talked about in the news, a lot of those photos would be people who were not posing. They're being caught in the moment, something that is organic and it's sincere, and it just happens to be captured by another person. And I think that what you're talking about brings that to a family of my children will not always be 3, 5, and 8. And this will be a peek inside of our lives, and we can look back at this when, they're graduating, and I can embarrass them in front of their friends. And
right.
So on.
Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah, I mean, and that's why, after coming from photojournalism, like, I just don't want to go the traditional route with photography. Like, I'm really good at capturing candid moments. Like, I can anticipate and, like, know when I need to, like, dive over to the floor in this area to capture something, not all the time, but, that's more my thing. That's what makes it fun for me, is, like, the candid nature and capturing the actual moments.
Yeah. So what brought you to jump out there, take the risk, and be your own freelance/entrepreneur?
Well, I guess I always thought that I would do that eventually, but when I went back to school in 2008, it was probably a pretty stupid time to try to get into photojournalism because the news industry newspapers especially, have not done very well in the last decade. I just saw an article, I think it was in Pointer, that has this been the worst decade in journalism history? was the title. And
sensational, maybe?
Right. Kind of sensational, but also true. I mean, that from the time that I started working at newspapers till I left, there were layoffs just about every year, So I probably made it through, 5 rounds of layoffs. And then I found this graph that showed the decline of newsroom employment from 2008 to 2017. Newsrooms employed 45% fewer people. So that's like almost half. So, in the decade that I was in newsrooms or in school, it just got harder and harder to do the work in a way that I wanted to do it. When you have fewer people, and you still have to cover the same amount of stuff. Yeah, the workload increases, and it's just so much harder to do things well, And in Springfield, I had done a lot of kind of long-term stories, and that's what I really love to do, is just kind of document someone over time. And I just couldn't do that here anymore, and I was just, yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say for people who say, well, it's just transferring online? Because I have a hunch that may be not the case. Because it's fragmenting, isn't it, right? Into smaller stories, way more outlets. Things now can be uploaded onto a Facebook post and fed, and then it has gone away from these, 4 or 5 trusted sources in each location. Some people may think, oh, this has just moved online, but as a person who is completely out of this realm and asking you, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's funny because you hear, on the one hand, there's more demand than ever for photography, right? And photojournalism maybe. But then on the other hand, there are fewer people willing to pay for it, right? They either think they can just find it for free, or that the stock art is going to be good enough, or that they can just do it themselves, which is fine, and that works for a lot of people. I guess it just kind of depends on the level of quality and impact you want to have. But yeah, I don't know. It's a weird landscape out there. And that's kind of why I'm trying to piece it together, doing photojournalism and family stuff and business branding and nonprofit storytelling.
But you would say that you provide something that a stock photo never could.
Yeah.
And it's probably similar to what got you into photojournalism in the first place, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Which would be what?
Authenticity? It's the realness of it that I love, and
I've always been fascinated with how you can show people an image on a PowerPoint slide and you'll have a completely different crowd reaction as a collegiate instructor than you will if it's a page full of text.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, the human brain processes a photo 6,000 times faster than words. So, yeah, it's an immediate attention-grabbing tool. And there are also studies that show that when you put stock photography in front of people, they just breeze right past it. They don't even look at it because they know it's not real. But when it's like a real moment in a photo with real people, and this was a study from the National Press Photographers Association, so they were comparing professional news photography to user-submitted, so reader-generated photos. Because at this time, they were trying to make a case for photojournalism, because when all the layoffs started happening, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe later, it seemed disproportionately that photographers were laid off instead of reporters. Right when I was in school and just getting out of school, it seemed like photographers were so the Chicago Sun-Times laid off their entire photojournalism staff and were like, we're just going to give iPhones to reporters. And so there was a lot made out of that, the World Cup photos on the front of the Chicago Sun-Times versus the Chicago Tribune, it was like, oh, one of these is good and the other is not. So I forgot where I was going with all that. Okay. Sorry.
As a person in academia, I can't help but think about this odd relationship between words and photographs. And I consider that until the printing press and widespread text came into being, everything that had been learned in humanity was either verbally spoken or it was learned while watching something, seeing something.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe pictures, especially in a learning moment, helps us connect to the natural way in which we learn things. If you are a child and you're learning about a sheep for the first time and you interact with a sheep, you're going to touch its fur, you're going to hear it, you're going to see what it looks like, you're going to realize that is a sheep, instead of reading about it in this big long paragraph of text, right? Both of them are necessary in today's society, but maybe that is what brings us so quickly back to a photograph and being able to connect with it, learn from it, and remember and have this emotional response to it, because that's the way we've learned for thousands of generations.
Yeah. I mean, the cliche is the cliche because it's true, right? A picture's worth 1,000 words. So, yeah. I mean, I think there's something way more immediate. I'm a visual learner. I mean, I think a lot of people are, but I don't know. You can just understand something better by seeing it. Yeah.
And beyond that, more than just that it's worth 1,000 words, but the 1,000 words that you put down are not going to tell the same story of my 1,000 words that I put down about that same photograph.
Yeah, right. There's also this concept of the third effect, which is about how pictures and words work together, and that together they're more powerful than either one is on its own.
Because they both tell different halves of an equally important story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think about it like a news photo, right, is always with a caption. They're married. Right. And the caption gives more context and tells you why it's important. And that's one thing in that study, the eye tracking study the NPPA did. They found that people look back and forth between the photo and the caption, trying to get more information,
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So I'll look at the photo, I have my initial reaction, I gather some information visually, I read, oh, okay, this is that person's name and this is what's happening to them. I look back at the picture, read some more details, look back.
Then maybe look around at the details in the photo, but faces attract the most attention. People go right for faces.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is a set of studies that I'm helping work with right now in UNC, and I'll keep the lid a little bit on it because it's not published yet. But we see people react differently in situations that have emotional, cognitive tasks. If we show you a happy face versus an angry face, versus not showing you faces at all. It'll actually change your ability to react, reaction time, and your ability to cope through difficult, cognitive, stressful experiences.
That's interesting.
Just the presence of another face heightens these emotions and causes us to cognitively switch differently.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, about creating a connection through photography, right? One of my main things is always to try to get emotion however I can, even if it's subtle. And that's what people react to the most, they can empathize with that person, see themselves in their shoes maybe a little more, because that's a human emotion that they relate to, you know?
Yeah. So if listeners are interested, Valerie, and they'd like to reach out, see your work, maybe work with you in the near future, how will people find you and get a hold of you?
So you can find me on Instagram at Val Mosley, that's VALMOSLEY, or my website is ValerieMosleyPhoto.com. Those are probably the best ways, I guess.
I think Instagram is how we connected, right?
Yes,
I think
it is.
You found the podcast on Instagram.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
If you enjoy The More You Know Co., please check out our other episodes. We've had such a variety of interesting and awesome people, you never know what you're going to find. I've been in awe and wonder going on this journey around northern Colorado. Read the episode descriptions, take a shot, and discover our NoCo community. Trevor Fossey, always putting in the time to edit and mix these episodes. Thank you so much for your dedication and hard work. Russell Isaac Long, our guest on episode 67 of the show, makes all our music here at The More You Know Co. Thank you, good sir. We are on Facebook and Instagram if you're interested in staying connected with us, or just to see bonus visual content in addition to this very audio-driven podcast experience. We will be back soon with another conversation, exploring and connecting the people who make up Northern Colorado. Until next time, peace!